What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another episode of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango. Joining me, as always, are Callum Wiggins.
Hey.
And Robert E. Felice.
It's Wrestlemania.
Not quite, really. But what if it was? That's kind of what we're doing here today. We're doing the first official edition of What If. We've done, discussions that are sort of like this in the past and variations of this theme, but as much as the Wrestling is 2020 was sort of translated by a lot of people, they thought that we were doing like a what if, such and such kind of thing. Instead, this is directly what if. And this was actually brought up by a friend of mine, Bret. Shout out to Bret for his suggestion of, hey, what if WrestleMania was always 2 nights? What would the other main event have been? Because now, this is going to be our 3rd year in a row where the WrestleMania weekend is split up as WrestleMania Saturday and WrestleMania Sunday. It's stupendous. Now, a whole lot of people know what that word is. Some people have to look that up. It's so stupid. But, the way that they do it now is a slight variation of what they've been doing for the past few years. And it used to be, back in the day for a decade or so, even more than that, it was the main event of WrestleMania, was the final match that went on, ipso facto, done. That's the definition. Eventually, they started to play around with that a little bit when they had the adoption of 2 different world champions. So one of the winners of the Royal Rumble, this year they could go in the main event. Then next year they are in a main event of WrestleMania. And it became less so that you're headlining and you're going to be the final one, and more so that you're just getting a prominent match. Eventually that turned into, you could even have the first match of the night, and we're going to classify that a main event of WrestleMania. But now that they do have these 2 spread out nights, pretty much officially, even though they still want to say as many main event things as possible, it is pretty much the main event of night 1, the main event of night 2. Last year, for instance, Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, they main evented WrestleMania night 1. Main event of night 2, the triple threat match with Edge and Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns. This year, we know that the main event of night 2 is most likely going to be Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, because
they said it.
I highly doubt that they're going to just change their mind and go, you know what, I think that Pat McAfee match is going to be last. That's not likely to happen. And then, of course, the main event of night 1 is going to be Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. So that's kind of the zeitgeist. Maybe things change in the future, but we wanted to look back. So this is kind of a little bit of a wrestling with the past, and a little bit of a wrestling is 2020, and a little bit of just a flat out what if. We're going to look back on the WrestleMania events from 1 to 36, and we were going to try to figure out what that other main event would have been if they would have split this up in 2 nights. Now, obviously, that also means WrestleMania wouldn't have been exactly the way that it was. And for instance, WrestleMania 1, there are only 9 matches on the card, and one of them is 25 seconds long. One of them is 4.5 minutes long. One of them is 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So clearly this was not the long show that it is now, where it's, 4 hours each night for 2 nights in a row, or 9 hours in one shot or something. So we have to take that and factor that in as well. We're just looking at the cards. We're not going to fantasy book extra cards to go along with that. It's just, look, you're splitting this card in half. What would have been the other main event? It's pretty simple. Sounds like it's a long explanation, but as we go along, I'm sure that you guys will get the hang of it. And as we do that and we toss out our suggestions, we want to know what you have to say. So drop your comments below on YouTube in particular. If you're elsewhere and you want to chime in, then send us a tweet or post something on Facebook or something. Put something in the comments on smarkonmoment.com. But if you are on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Ring that little notification bell as well. Hit the like button if you are enjoying this. Hit the share button if you want to pass it along. And hit the little thanks button if you want to help us out on the monetary side of things. Of course, some other methods of doing that are the Patreon and the members only access on YouTube. Click on those buttons. You'll get access to the Darkcasts and the Pick Your Poison tier. We got some Pick Your Poison stuff coming up soon. We're going to do a Darkcast this week as well. So stay tuned for that. And check out the TeePublic and Redbubble shops for any kind of the merchandise side. 5 minutes in now, we got all that stuff all out of the way. Let's dive right into this and start getting into the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. The meat being the main event that already happened. The potatoes being the side dish, I guess. I don't know. That's how we're going to justify it here. What would the potatoes be? Imagine the SEO. That would just not make any sense at all. So, night one of WrestleMania 1. I'm kind of working under the assumption, I don't know about you guys, but I'm working under the assumption every one of these would be night 1 because the main event that they chose would have been night 2, right?
I would assume. But maybe, there's ones where it would make more sense to switch it up.
Maybe. I mean, we'll see when we come down with our picks, but we've got those 9 matches of WrestleMania 1. The main event that happened is Hulk Hogan and Mr. T against Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. Secondary main event. I'm looking at the list right now. I'm not feeling like there's a strong definite contender, but I'm assuming it's Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd in the career versus $15,000 body slam challenge.
No, it's the women's match. Cyndi Lauper's there.
Oh, that's right. Cyndi Lauper's in that. Okay, well, there you go. That does make more sense to me. Callum, you got to vote one way or the other?
I'd like to cheat on this one.
How's that?
I think I know what you're going to do.
The main event should be Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper for the WWF Championship.
So you're thinking do the tag team match on night 1, then do split that up.
I know that's technically fantasy booking, but it's dumb that it's a tag team match as the main event of the first night of WrestleMania. Is the birthday of WrestleMania.
I'll give them that.
I'm cool with it.
Fantasy booking should be able to play a role if it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not going to go completely wild and just say, oh, they should have brought in Ric Flair at this point in time and put him up against.
Right. Or, okay, well, these 9 matches equate to like an hour-long special, so we need to have 4 hours more worth of extra matches or something. Nah, that stuff's too complicated. I mean, if you want to pay for it, pick your poison for each one of these, and certainly not do it for all the WrestleMania. That's way too much.
It just feels odd that like Hogan and Piper didn't fight for a world title on a pay-per-view. Or at least on a WWE.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait, WCW.
Well, they fought on MTV, though.
Did they really fight on? I mean, I guess they did fight on WCW.
They did fight
for a title, but it was their first match on WCW wasn't for a title, even though one of them was the champion.
Well, that's because Hogan had to lose, brother.
Yeah,
can't lose the title now. That's ridiculous.
See, now I would assume in the 80s like this, the likelihood that the Wendy Richter and Leilani Kai match would have been treated as well is not as strong as what it is today.
That is absolutely where you're 100% wrong because Wendy Richter was supposed to be the female Hulk Hogan. She just wanted a little bit too much money out of Vince and then got erased from history for a while.
She was obviously at this point in time, like Hogan's the top name and Andre's probably second biggest babyface. But then I'd say under that, then it's Richter. And Richter has the advantage in this is having a championship. Well, we'd be fighting for a championship, so to say. So, yeah, I don't think it's out of the question that she would have main evented, especially with the Cyndi Lauper influence.
It's funny, even though we talk about how long it took women to headline Mania, Wendy Richter was a huge part of rock and wrestling. Like, Vince understood the value of presenting women as not completely equal, like match length and stuff like that, but equal in terms of we need a star for the girls as well.
Just for the sake of argument, if we went with the women's match on one night and we went with the tag team match on the other night, if we're splitting up what I would assume would be the Andre match and the Intercontinental Championship match, which do you think would work on which night better?
You'd put Andre on night 1 probably, and the Intercontinental title on night 2.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, considering the way that the Intercontinental match ends, which is the babyface wins but by count out, that's kind of because I assume we can't change any of the results anyway.
Right.
Not that we would want to anyway. But just a case of I'd put the Andre match because Andre's a bigger deal. So you put him on the night which has slightly less star power.
Plus, I mean, the World Championship isn't on the line on night 2, so at least you get a title match on night 2.
You get a title match. That's my thought as well.
Yeah. So, already we have a wrench thrown in here for WrestleMania 2, because WrestleMania 2 split things up in 3. So, they did technically have 3 main events, over one night.
Which makes our job that much easier.
Well, then that means, look, we got to pick one goes on night one goes on night two. They didn't split it up. It's just, a 2-night show, that kind of thing.
They didn't go to 3 cities. They only went to 2.
Right. So it's basically, we got to pick 2 out of those 3.
That's pretty straightforward.
I think that it's pretty obvious. It's Mr. T versus Roddy Piper in the boxing match on night 1. Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, Steel Cage night 2. Because the Dream Team against British Bulldogs, that's not going to beat out either of those 2.
Well, no, the main event on one of those was either the Andre Battle Royal or Savage defending the IC title against George Steele, and neither one of those needs to be in the main event slot. Andre literally has a Battle Royal named after him every year at WrestleMania on a pre-show, so you can do that in like the opener, and Savage and George Steele doesn't need to be a main event.
All in agreement?
Yeah, it would be Mr. T versus Roddy Piper, although considering how that went down, it would be the worst main event in WrestleMania, one of the worst main events in WrestleMania history. It was just like it's just an absolute train wreck. It's like the match ends when Piper gets fucked off and decides to body slam Mr. T.
I'm sure that there's going to be some other ones that are in contention to match that.
There's some real main events that are probably worse than that anyway.
Yeah.
But,
So then, of course, WrestleMania 3, we're just, going along here. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, main event, the whole thing. We have 11...
I wonder what match should be the other main event.
We have 11 other matches, and I don't see a groundswell of support for Butch Reed versus Coco Beware, or for Billy Jack Haynes against Hercules ending in a double count out or something. This is very clearly Ricky Steamboat against Randy Savage.
I mean, yeah.
there really is no other option.
No, I mean, I'd love to hear an argument if anybody does have one in the comments below. Like, keep that train rolling and doing a devil's advocate kind of thing. But I don't think you're going to get much support.
The only thing I would ever change on this whole card is instead of the Hart Foundation teaming with Danny Davis and Tito Santana teaming with the Bulldogs, you just say, screw those 2, and you do a tag team title match between the Bulldogs and the Harts. Because that would make this the ultimate card. Like, that is the tag team match of 87, so why wouldn't you do it at WrestleMania?
Well, I mean, these days, the philosophy for WrestleMania isn't, let's try to get the best match. It's, what kind of distraction can we put out there? So, WrestleMania 4...
Fucking hell! Like
this is a tournament.
You can't do anything about this one. Like you can't just make one of the tournament matches the main event as well of like night 1 and then have the final on night 2. Especially because none of the tournament matches are any good and they all go less than 10 minutes.
The hard thing about that is at most with a tournament you do the semifinals. And you just pick one of those, and then you do that. But then which one of the semifinals?
So,
and then if you split that up or whatever, and you do like, okay, well, half the tournament matches are on this night, half the other one, but we need something else on that first night. I think it might have to be Brutus Beefcake against Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Championship.
No, it can't be that because of the 2 people you just said.
Well, yeah.
At that point in time, like if that was a main event of a night at WrestleMania, people would be basically saying, "Yeah, I don't really want a main event WrestleMania at this point in time." It's like to be associated with Brutus Beefcake and the Honky Tonk Man.
All right, so outside of that match also, by the way, ends in a DQ finish.
Exactly,
so you can't do that.
Well, pretty much half the WrestleMania matches on this card end in a DQ or a draw or something.
What you can do, even though it does end in a draw, because they were pushing this match out anyway, is you have Hogan and Andre headline night 1. Oh my God, they're both out of the tournament. Tune in tomorrow to see what happens. And then you do the rest of the tournament. And then Savage and DiBiase headline night 2.
I think you pretty much are in a boat or in this situation where you have to restructure the tournament. And it's just, you got to do the Hogan and Andre thing, yeah.
It's just because there's too many things to go weird in this entire thing is like, because Hogan and Andre are in the quarterfinals, so they aren't in the first round. So there's a whole first round before you get to Hogan and Andre. Then you've got other quarterfinals, and there's a draw at one point of the tournament where some one-man gang doesn't fight a quarterfinal. Then because of the Hogan DQ, DiBiase doesn't have a semi-final match. So it's not like a case of like, oh, choose between one or two semi-finals. Well, there's only one semi-final in this entire tournament as well. It's like it was all over the place. I would say that you just make it simple, and the other main event is Demolition against Strikeforce for the tag titles.
And even then, that's just
It was the longest match. It was the longest match that didn't end in a time limit draw. So at least you get a lengthy match out of it. And yeah,
Demolition. This is not a WrestleMania I would split in two.
It's not a WrestleMania I would ever watch or go back to see.
This one's a tough one. It might end up being the toughest one out of our list here. So if anybody has any other suggestions, again, drop them in the comments.
What did you say, Hogan and Andre?
I said if you don't go with the Intercontinental title match just because it's the Intercontinental
title.
You
want the awful match. Yeah.
Just in theory, the Intercontinental title thing, then it makes sense to me to do Hogan and Andre. And just end it with some sort of like, oh my God, what are you going to do the next night, like you were saying? More than likely, that's probably what they would do. Of course, then, the philosophy behind this whole thing, you got to take into account. If they were to split this up in 2 nights, I would assume the majority of most of these cards would be completely different. So I don't think that they would even bother to do a tournament. I think that they would have done a tournament leading up to it or something, and then that would have been factored in as well. But we can't go back to all, decades and decades and decades and influence anything. We can't influence anything at all anyway right now. So what the hell, So WrestleMania 6 comes around, or WrestleMania 5 that we're on right now. And Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, of course, easily the main event of that. But looking for a secondary one of that. It's certainly not going to be the one that just precedes that, a 31-second match with Red Rooster beating Bobby Heenan. Good Lord. This seems like it's Rick Rude versus Ultimate Warrior. I'm looking at this right now.
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't see anything else really stand out.
I would absolutely say so. I mean, Hogan and Warrior are the top 2 guys anyway.
It helps set the scene for WrestleMania 6, obviously, as well, because like if they're both in the main event of WrestleMania 5, then they're just clashing. The 2 winners clash at WrestleMania 6.
Yeah, it makes sense. I won the main event of WrestleMania last year. Yep, well, so did I. Well, okay, let's go at it then. And then, of course, we get to WrestleMania 6 with Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan.
This makes it more difficult because there's no Intercontinental title match now.
Right.
Yeah, this is actually a really good one, because what would you put in the main event of the first night? It can be argued the main singles feud outside of this is Jake and DiBiase.
It kind of looks like that, right, for the $1 Million Championship, because there are some other matches that are, at least, at that point in time, that they were important, like Randy Savage and Sherry against Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire, but I don't know about a mixed tag match being the main event of WrestleMania.
I know what, at least in a historical perspective, wouldn't be the other main event, and that's Bad News Brown versus Roddy Piper.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that whole thing is cut from the show now, isn't it?
Amazing. It just like cuts off before, like if it wasn't a WWE network and they decided they'd make that the main event, just cut the entire end of the show.
It just goes from like Big Boss Man against Akeem to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Honestly, there is a cut of 20 that completely rearranges everything that I never saw, but it does exist.
Really?
And yeah, because when we'll get to it, but so what I would do actually is Demolition against Andre and Haku, because of the way it ends, with Andre getting the standing ovation and beating up Bobby Heenan. And I think that's a cool way to end his career.
It is his final WrestleMania match. So if you knew that going in, it would be a good way of rounding it off.
It's for a title, so I could see that being the case. And, the Ted DiBiase and Jake Roberts thing, that's a $1 Million Championship. And even though that meant a lot more back in the day, it's not the Intercontinental. It's not a secondary world title. It's not, the women's world title or anything. So I'm cool with the tag title match. I'm cool as if this is something that needs to go through
If
my
you
approval.
care. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. As if they care if you like it or not.
Yeah. WrestleMania 7, Hulk Hogan against Sergeant Slaughter for the WWF Championship.
This is easy.
It's a very easy one. It's Randy Savage versus Ultimate Warrior. Yeah.
I'd argue that could end the second night.
It
Honestly, that could end the second night of WrestleMania.
Yeah, and then you got like some matches that like you're starting to get to the point where you're adding more matches on the card that look like they could be marquee. You know, you got.
I mean, the next three we're going to talk about either have a branded double main event or feature 2 world title matches.
I mean, you say that they're looking like a bit more marquee. I don't really see anything on this that really stands up to either of those 2 matches. I mean, got Virgil against Ted DiBiase. I guess that was a feud,
right?
So.
Like, that's a good enough mid card feud kind of thing. It's not going to main event, but it's like I could see
what today.
I could see 15. Yeah, they have 15 matches on this card. I could see splitting it up where it's like Hogan, Slaughter, and Legion of Doom and Power and Glory, and the Undertaker and Jimmy Snuka. You know, they do that kind of thing. And then another night you've got Boss Man against Perfect, and you got Virgil and DiBiase, and you got the retirement match. Like, it's starting to kind of balance out a little bit like that. Again, not every match really matters. It's not like Texas Tornado versus Dino Bravo is something that everybody goes, oh man, the 3 and 11-minute match is the best thing in the world.
Well, in context, the Undertaker Jimmy Snuka match doesn't happen. We only know it's significant because of what happened afterwards. Like, at that point in time, Undertaker had only been with the company a couple of months, and he was just like,
it's
the walking zombie against a close to retired Jimmy Snuka.
Sounds like an attraction to me.
But thankfully, this is one of the WrestleManias where it's like spoon-fed to us.
Is it an airplane coming through?
Absolutely.
So as you mentioned it, we follow that up with a full-blown, this is the main event, and it should be potentially flipped around. We know that we're getting Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice. I would have thought that would have made more sense to be on night 1. And then night 2, you've got Randy Savage against Ric Flair for the WWF Championship.
Yeah, if I can fantasy book my world, that's night 1, and we don't care about, you know, Hogan and Sid ending in a DQ because Sid supposedly just kicks out of the leg drop when he's not supposed to.
I mean, if you could ultimate fantasy book, it should be Randy Savage and Ric Flair on night 2, and Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper on night 1. And Sid and Hogan should be just in the card somewhere.
Nah, they're too big. You gotta. I mean, obviously, if you're fantasy booking, you don't have Hogan and Sid happen at the way that it does at WrestleMania or Rumble. You know, right?
Something else.
Hogan and Flair and Savage and Sid even makes sense. So that's a whole mess. It's another can of worms. WrestleMania 9 is interesting.
Pick your poison here.
So with WrestleMania 9, technically speaking, the main event is Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna. Obviously,
you can't make Yoko and Bret the main event the other night because that directly leads into the Hogan Yokozuna match.
So Hogan has to headline night 1 with Beefcake.
No, he doesn't. Stop putting Beefcake in main events. Beefcake does not belong in main events of anything.
This is actually advertised as the double main event, so I'm just going with the advertising.
This is a WrestleMania that I really want to revisit because, man, there's a lot of talent on this.
There's a lot
this
of
WrestleMania sucks.
This sucks so bad.
Because if you just look at this, you've got Mr. Perfect, Undertaker, Ted DiBiase, Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, the Steiner brothers, Bret Hart, Yokozuna. That sounds like you can make a great card out of this. It just didn't happen. Because Tatanka versus Shawn Michaels, it's a count out for the Intercontinental Championship. You got the Giant Gonzalez match is absolute fucking garbage. So you can't book that as being like, that's how we're going to send them home happy is Undertaker beats Giant Gonzalez. That's a shit match. By DQ, yeah, on top of that.
I've been choked out by a rag.
So
it's certainly not Lex Luger beats Mr. Perfect with a backslide.
So it is kind of tough because it's like, technically, would you do a split with Yoko? I don't think that makes sense because the part of the appeal is the random Hogan pops up and immediately just does that thing. And that's been something that shouldn't have happened in the first place anyway.
Appeal is a strong word.
That was what they're going for. They think it's going to be an appeal.
I mean, the reality is, and here's what they would do. They would just have Hogan and both fucking nights. And it sucks. And it's awful, but it's what they would do.
Yeah, but that means we're putting IRS and Beefcake in a main event of a show. It's like... Part of me just would prefer just put Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez on one of the ones instead.
Yeah,
just because that match is more renowned.
It is more historic.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
everyone knows that match. I mean, it would I'm sure some of the future main events would thank us for putting that as one of the main events because that would definitively be the worst main event in WrestleMania history.
That's true.
Like Miz and John Cena would be thanking their lucky stars at that point.
And what also sucks is if you go with the tag team championship match, it ends in a DQ. So that's really flat too.
Well, the tag match ends in a disqualification. The Intercontinental title match ends in a count out. They do the whole thing with the tag titles is they teased that Hogan and Beefcake won, but then they were DQ'd actually. And so you just go with, oh, they did win, but actually no, it's the heels instead. Like, so yeah. I don't really want another main event on this one. I don't want this card to.
It's hard. This one is like you'd have to restructure the whole thing.
Something would have to change.
Make this better.
I don't think I have a real answer for it.
I can't think of something either.
The only thing I can think of is that you actually have the Megamaniacs win the tag team titles,
and then Yoko actually just beats Bret.
Maybe.
But you'd have to change everything.
Right. I don't think there's a real set answer for this one.
Yeah, so you have Hogan win then win the tag titles, then you have Hogan win the world title in the main event, and then on a random house show wins the Intercontinental Championship from Michaels, and then he leaves the company with all 3 belts. And
just goes, I'm saying, like, in this world, you would have to like scrap the Yoko Hogan thing. And just have Hogan win tag titles. It's gross.
But still more gross than him just beating the guy for the world title after he just won it.
Yeah, I think that's just one of this might be the one that we just don't have a real set answer for.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 10, we know the answer for this one. You do one title match on night 1 and one title match on night 2. Right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame because really Razor and Michael
one of the ladder match really should be the main event of something.
Yeah, but realistically, that's the way that they would do it.
If you're booking it like today's wrestling, Bret would open night 1 with Owen. Luger and Yoko would close it. Ladder match would open night 2.
Yep.
And Bret and Yoko would close it.
Yeah, pretty much. You would actually have time on the card for all the matches instead of one of them just being cut.
And then tag in.
You'd split up, of course, like a match like the Randy Savage and Crush match opposite something like the Earthquake and Atom Bomb match or something, just to sort of balance out the scales a little bit there. But that's basically what it would do. Owen and Bret open up night 1. Night 1 ends with Yoko and Luger. Night 2 starts off with the Intercontinental title match, and then you end it with Bret Hart and Yokozuna. Yeah. Can't imagine that's all that difficult. Same thing when it comes to WrestleMania 11. It's the title match. There you go.
Shawn and Diesel would actually be able to headline a show.
Yeah, that's a very, very easy one. There's nothing that comes even like close to contention for that, I think. I don't know if they would necessarily switch those around, though. Do you think that they would still go with that?
Well, there's a reason why they went with the other match first. They went with the other match as the main event first time round. It's because Michaels and Diesel weren't big enough stars to be the main event of WrestleMania.
But do you think that just the fact that, like, okay, we're getting them for 2 nights anyway, we might as well end with the championship match? Or do you think that they would still do the whole thing?
I mean,
no, they would go the bigger match, which is Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow.
But what would a headline the other night? Or you're asking...
I'm saying Diesel and Michaels would go first.
On night one rather than night two. That's what I was... Yeah, I was suggesting, like, do you think that they might flip them?
Nope.
Because I could see a case making it for both ways. You're just like, oh, you know what?
I wouldn't flip them. I mean, there's a reason why Diesel and John didn't headline, as Callum said. They didn't trust him.
And, you know, realistically speaking, at this point, that's the 11th WrestleMania. And they would just kind of try to market it probably as, and look at this, you're not even going to have to wait until night 2 for the championship match because you're going to get on night 1. Isn't that great?
Well,
you know,
realistically speaking, we're now in the WrestleManias that are shorter than a modern episode of Raw.
Isn't that crazy?
So, like, these would be very hard to split in any way, but that's exactly the way the main events would go, at least.
Funny enough, the next one we're talking about is also shorter than an episode of Raw, but it somehow feels longer.
Well, part of that is because the main event of night 2 would have to be...
Well, exactly. I mean, to be fair, that one match feels like longer than an episode of Raw.
Yeah.
So that 60-minute Iron Man match for WrestleMania 12 is, of course, one of the main events.
And the other one being, obviously...
The Undertaker and Diesel.
Yeah, there you go.
I would actually vote for Piper against Goldust instead.
I would too if that was an actual match.
It was more fun. It was more fun than
I guess
match.
they could still end the night, but the way it's structured, it has to go on throughout the entire night.
It has a fucking O.J. Simpson clip in it. It's like...
it's a great match. I'm just saying, the way it's structured, you can't say that's the main event when it happens the entire night.
Yeah, you have to market it as Diesel and Undertaker are the main event. And then you just have fun with it.
Yeah, because WWE have never done a video kind of a cinematic match as the main event of WrestleMania.
You know what? I guess in modern
the first ever dual main event of WrestleMania was a cinematic match.
But it was one segment. It wasn't throughout the night.
I guess
you could theoretically shoot this as one segment then.
You could, I mean, but they would lose some of its charm, you know?
Yeah, maybe it is slightly better that it gets broken up. So, yeah, you would have to go with Undertaker and Diesel then.
WrestleMania...
Warrior versus Triple H.
Yeah, just squash them, and that's the end of it. And then see you later, everybody. WrestleMania 13 is very easy as well. We've got Undertaker and Psycho Sid for the WWF Championship on one night, but you've got Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Submission match, Ken Shamrock, special guest referee. Easily the other main event.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Not very much discussion needed on that one.
No questions about that one. That's one of the simplest ones that we could do here because that's one of those just absolutely amazing matches that if for some reason you haven't seen that, you have to go back and watch that. That takes us into WrestleMania 14. It seems like we're barreling through this really fast, right? But we still have 20 more to go. So Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, WWF Championship, Mike Tyson as the special outside ring enforcer who comes in and counts the pin and does a super fast count and whatnot. Undertaker and Kane.
Yeah, I'd say so.
This one's a slam dunk too, because that Undertaker and Kane match is maybe the best match in the streak before you start getting into like the latter years for Undertaker. This is like the first I'd watch that match again match in the streak.
And it's got the pomp and circumstance. It feels like a main event. It's got two of the best people, no questions. Next time around, we get WrestleMania 15. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock for the WWF Championship. And yeah, this one's not as easy as some of these other ones.
I know it's Undertaker and Boss Man in a Hell in a Cell match, but you can't end night one of WrestleMania with someone hanging. They hang the Big Boss Man.
It's like looking at this card, like you can rule out some pretty easily, of course. Like it's not going to be the pre-show matches, obviously. It's not going to be Hardcore Holly against Al Snow for the Hardcore Championship. It's not Owen and Jeff.
And Billy Gunn. Sorry,
and Billy Gunn, yeah.
Because he was the champion.
And Owen and Jeff against D'Lo and Test for the tag titles, no. Road Dogg against Goldust and Ken Shamrock and Val Venus for the Intercontinental title, no. Sable and Tori, no. Shane and X-Pac for the European title, no. It really, the only ones that are potentially in the discussion are Butterbean and Bart Gunn in the Brawl for All, which can't possibly do that. That just doesn't make sense. But at least it's like an attraction type of thing. You got Mankind and Big Show. to determine the special guest referee. So you could kind of say that that's the main event to set up the next night, but I don't like that idea a whole lot. Kane and Triple H is just a singles match. If that was like the Intercontinental title, I think that would stand a chance.
That one can't be the main event because of what Triple H does in the Shane McMahon X-Pac match.
And it ends in a DQ, and I don't like that. So,
like, realistically, it's probably going to be freaking Big Show versus Mick Foley to decide who's going to be the referee in night 2.
And that you just like, give them like the Hell in a Cell match right before that or something.
Well, I think you were really quick to dismiss Sable and Tori. And it sounds like a weird thing to say, but Sable was a huge star at that point.
Listen, if the match is Sable in China, hell yeah, that's the main event of night 2. But
Tori, yeah.
Yeah.
But Sable's the star out of that one.
Sure, I'm not arguing that.
I just don't feel like any of the other ones really stand out for, like, Big Show and Mankind is like, okay, I guess, but...
Oh no, it sucks.
Yeah. But like at least it's like there's a hook to it, and I can understand why they would do that. I could see that being how they would do it, where they would split it up, where it's like you're getting Hell in a Cell the first night, and you're finding out who the special guest referee is.
And then if that fails, realistically, we're talking in hindsight saying you can't hang somebody, but they'd probably hang somebody in the main event of WrestleMania.
Yeah, and then it's, hey, the main event of WrestleMania ended with somebody hanging. Isn't that fucking great? God knows what's going to happen the next night,
All your friends.
To be fair, I don't think anybody thought that was a good idea when they at the time. Well, outside of the people that booked it, obviously. But
yeah.
But I don't think anybody kind of left the show thinking, hey, it was really great when they hanged that guy.
Sure, there's 5 people. So WrestleMania 2000 ends in a fatal 4-way. It's Triple H, The Rock, Mick Foley, and Big Show. This is a WrestleMania that I've not watched.
It's so bad.
This is a bad WrestleMania.
It's so bizarre about how 2000 is, like, until recent times, the most successful year in the company's history financially. And it has one of the worst WrestleManias of all time. It has Isn't
that just kind of indicative of the way that things are now? They're making more money than ever, and everybody's just like, everything sucks.
Well, we thought the WrestleMania would be good.
They have a reason for this to suck.
Yeah. It has one singles match on the entire show, which is Terry Runnels versus the Cat. And so...
In a stink face match?
No, that was SummerSlam.
Oh, well, whatever.
This one was just a plain old cat fight.
And it's got Mae Young, Fabulous Moolah, and Val Venus also involved.
Yeah. So, in terms of like the best match on the show, which you would want to put in the main event, it would be the Triangle Ladder match for the tag titles. But then the realistic part of your brain kicks is, well, they'd never make that the main event of the show.
Right. They would at least do the Intercontinental and European Championship match.
They would do. I'll tell you what they would do right now. They'd say, "Fuck the Big Show." Night 1 is Triple H and Foley, and night 2 is Triple H and The Rock. But since you can't change it that drastically,
well, you could do Triple H versus Foley. Night 1, and also Rock versus Big Show.
Yeah,
and then winner of that. Yeah, and then winner of that goes to night 2.
Yeah,
that's what they would do.
Because it'd be like, well, we need to settle how that ended at WrestleMania, Royal Rumble.
Frankly, that'd be so much better. Triple H versus Mick Foley never fails to deliver. Triple H versus The Rock is how WrestleMania should have ended.
But then you got to change it all again, really, because like
the McMahons.
Well, not even the McMahon side of it. It's Triple H retired, Foley. The show before this.
No, you do the exact same thing. You just do the story of, well, I'm Linda McMahon and I want to give him his dream. So he's going to fight night 1.
But what blows about that too is then that means that night 1 of WrestleMania for that year is the 2 matches that happened at Royal Rumble.
Well, it's too much. Too much happened at No Way Out. They both happened.
Nobody cares.
Yeah. But it was just it's just because like now for the first night, especially if the results stay the same, that means both night 1 and night 2 you have to watch Triple H beat both Mick Foley and The Rock.
Yeah.
fucking suck. That would suck so
Which
hard.
seems more logical now, but like back then, Triple H wasn't that big of a star. They probably wouldn't even go with that, you know?
So this might be one of those ones where they just kind of hack and slash this card. Maybe some of the matches stay the same. Maybe it's still like the triangle ladder match. Maybe you don't end up having something like a hardcore battle royal. Maybe you have a couple more matches just to kind of fill things out and spread it out a little bit. But yeah, Kane and Rikishi against DX and China and Too Cool against the Radicals. Like, I don't know. I mean, nothing stands out to me other than that two-fall triple threat match for both the championships. Like, maybe you headline that, but they never really liked doing that kind of stuff to begin with. So this is another tough one.
I think the most logical one is you do the Triple H and Foley match night 1, but then you just do the Triple H Rock match night 2, but you have the Rock win.
I think that's what I would do. I would actually bump up the Austin thing from Backlash.
You do that.
Have him do that at Mania.
I mean, there's no problem.
What's Austin do at Backlash?
He helps comes the Rock win.
Yeah, so they actually do the Rock versus Triple H one-on-one match at Backlash instead. And then that's the whole thing where basically the Rock is completely outnumbered by the McMahons. Austin makes a big return. He doesn't return to the ring because he's still injured at that point, but he comes down, just takes out every single person with a steel chair, except the Rock, obviously. Earl Hebner comes back with Linda McMahon, and he gets in the ring, and he counts the pinfall, and that's like a big moment. But then, of course, Triple H has to win the belt back the very next show. Then he goes back to the Rock. That's what 2000 was like. Everybody just held the title for about a month or two.
Do you think that they would do something where the McMahons feuding with each other would be something more along the lines of pulling the trigger and having Shane against Vince?
Well, that kind of ruins WrestleMania 17, doesn't it? Vince against Shane at WrestleMania 17.
Then again, they're not thinking a year in advance.
Well, no.
So maybe they just sort of jumped the gun on that.
Yeah, but the end of WrestleMania 2000 is Vince McMahon turning heel and siding with Triple H after being his enemy for the previous months. So again, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility considering how over the top and ridiculous they booked. They would do Vince versus Shane on night 1 with Vince still as a babyface, and then Vince would turn heel the very next night and side with, and then Shane comes out the very next night on Raw and he's like, "Oh, I'm now angry at you," but then he turns the very same time and he joins up and you get in the same situation. But I think it's I think that would be changing way too much at that point.
I kind of like the idea of just bumping up the Backlash thing. That sounds pretty cool. So let's put that in the atmosphere and in the ethos that's what we would do if we were shackled like this. And then move on to WrestleMania for 2001, X7, 17. I hate all that garbage. Stone Cold Steve Austin against The Rock is the main event. And then you've got the TLC match. You've got Undertaker Triple H. You've got Shane and Vince.
So there's more scope to believe they might do the TLC match because they already know that really worked on the previous WrestleMania, and these guys are more established now. But
wouldn't it potentially just open?
Well, yeah, it could potentially open one of the shows. I'd imagine that's probably more likely.
Yeah, I kind of got a feeling that looking at this 12-match card, if you're assuming the tag team matches on the pre-show, it's just, we're splitting it 6 and 6. I would assume that TLC one opens up one of those nights. And then the opposite night, not necessarily opening up, but the opposite night, you have the gimmick battle royal, just to have like 2 gimmicky matches, that kind of thing. You've got potentially the Jericho and William Regal match opens up night 2 if you do the opposite thing and put TLC at the opening of night 1. I don't think the TLC would end up headlining, though. I think it would end up being either Shane and Vince or Undertaker Triple H, and I'm probably leaning more towards Shane and Vince.
Oh, The only way you could do that is if, like, they had a definitive, okay, we're actually going to do something with the WCW guys. They wouldn't. And going with what we know, it should just be Taker and Triple H. And I'm going to say that several times.
It would be Shane and Vince.
You think it would be Shane and Vince?
Because it's Vince.
Yeah, well, yeah, at that point in time, they probably think they are going to do something with WCW. So it's like, and the Undertaker and Triple H is, at that point in time, it was fine, but it had been built for, 3 weeks leading into this show. So like they would do anything special. Triple H beat Stone Cold to Boston in the previous main event, and Undertaker was fighting for the tag titles. So it's not like they were in a really like heated blood feud going into this thing. So yeah, Shane and Vince is the bigger match.
I'll allow it, but I'm not happy about it.
I'll allow it. It's I'll do my approval thing. You'll allow it. What's going to be Callum's side of this kind of thing? Just like I guess I'll go along with this or something.
Yeah. This one's easy.
Triple H and Chris Jericho on WrestleMania X8.
That's night one. That's night one. That's night one of WrestleMania.
Let me tell you something. That's night one. Because night 2 of WrestleMania is
Edge and Booker T.
Yeah. Obviously. Clearly.
It's The Rock and Hulk Hogan. It's fucking, yeah, it's one of the easiest ones that we've got going on here by far. It's not going to be, as much as some of the other ones on paper are still big matches, Undertaker and Ric Flair does not trump Rock and Hogan. Kurt Angle and Kane, nowhere close to that. It's Hogan and Rock. Come on. That's night 2. That makes perfect sense. Triple H and Jericho. Yeah, Triple H is a big deal at the time. Him coming back, that's going to be a big thing, whatever. But that's another one of those things where you go, and the title match is happening on the first night and whatever, because the big marquee star power match is night 2.
Now, 19 is an interesting one. Because
it's got 4 main events.
Yeah, and if you really apply modern logic, like maybe both championship matches end up opening both nights. Because the main event of one of those nights has to be Austin and Rock.
What's so weird is not only does it have these 4 matches, it also has Shawn Michaels and Jericho, which is like one of the best matches, but that's not going to main event. So a lot of people some people I'm sure that are listening to this are like, why are you guys not saying that the best match should main event? And it's, well, first off, they don't know what's going to be the best match. You can pretty much know. You know that Shawn Michaels and Jericho is going to be. Right, but like that's the thing is, going into the card like this, Shawn Michaels and Jericho, they're going to kick ass. They're going to just tear the house down. But you don't know in retrospect and in hindsight what ends up working or what ends up being a problem or, whatever end of that. So you can't judge it on that. And WWE never books things in the philosophy of the best in-ring match needs to go last. It's only if that's also convenient. So if you're booking this with the WWE philosophy in mind, you can't just say, hey, William Regal is going to have the best match of the night for the European Championship, so let's put that in the main event. It's not happening. So Jericho and Michaels, out of the picture. It's not the main event of either night. It could open one of those 2 nights, or it could be the thing that... It could be the thing that saves one of the other matches as being like, well, we'll give you that match, then we'll go into Hogan and McMahon. Like, totally different style thing. But it's real tough to narrow this down because I kind of go in the other assumption, okay, one of those nights has to be Lesnar and Angle. I'm kind of assuming, right?
Maybe, but
it is their main event, technically, so that is the match that they valued the most.
Actually, that was like one of those rare, and we're hitting that time where they got really stubborn about like, no, the guy won the Royal Rumble. The belt has to main event, because if they did that card today, Angle and Lesnar is in headline. McMahon and Hogan is headline.
But you got Austin and The Rock.
Well, that would headline the other night. They just wouldn't headline with either one of the world titles.
Do you think they would just end up supplementing them like that?
I think at best, Angle and Lesnar could be semi-main of night 2. Triple H and Booker T is probably going to be the first one where they go, we're kicking off WrestleMania with a title match because that match ain't worth a damn in hindsight. And I think everything else just falls into place. But I think the two main events end up being Rock and Austin and Hogan and Vince, with Rock and Austin being the main event of night 2 and Hogan and Vince headlining night 1. But this one's hard, though.
I think it's Brock and Angle and then Rock and Austin. Well, I'd say Rock and Austin would be night 1 and Brock and Angle would be night 2.
That's where I'm kind of leaning.
I think McMahon is self-aware enough that he wouldn't make himself the main event.
He wouldn't headline with Hogan, but he headlined with his son. I think Hogan's the bigger star than Shane.
Hogan is the biggest, I would say, but he's got an actual championship match that he wants to put out here, or a big world title match that he probably wants to put out. Lesnar's his next big star,
right? He's the next big thing.
That's true.
Yeah,
I'm kind of thinking they'd split it. I'm almost kind of like, I don't have the thing on the screen right now, but I'm kind of like visually in my head. Wouldn't be on screen anyway if it was just visually in my head. I'm picturing right now splitting this 10-match card 5 and 5, and I'm thinking night 2 you got Lesnar and Angle, and you also have Hogan and McMahon, because that's a street fight, so that's not a technical in-ring wrestling championship match. And then you put Triple H and Booker T on night 1, and you put the Rock and Austin on night 1 as well. Maybe you start off Triple H and Booker T on night 1, just like we're going to kick things off with the World Heavyweight Championship, like Rob's saying. Maybe you start off night 2 with Michaels and Jericho or something. But I kind of think that you balance it out like that. And then I'm also, just for the sake of it, if I'm saying those 5 matches are like that, I'm trying to figure out what the 6th match would be that would balance that. Out of this remaining 5, what do you think would that other match be?
The women's title match.
Trish against Victoria? Yeah.
And Jazz.
Okay, yeah. Just looking at the screen, the Wikipedia thing. Yeah, maybe have that as like a night 1 kind of deal. Yeah. Just for the sake of that too. Now I'm sitting there going, okay, well then you got the tag team title match, whatever. I'm thinking you're splitting that up and then you're going cruiserweight on night 2 or something. But that's an interesting one. That one you actually have a plethora of options that you can play around with. Some of the other ones.
Well, there's something fun you could do with this one as well that you couldn't do with any previous show. This is Raw and SmackDown now. They've now had the brand split.
So you could just do WrestleMania Raw and WrestleMania SmackDown.
Yeah. So the Raw matches are Rock and Austin, Triple H and Booker T, Michaels and Jericho, the women's title match, and the World Tag Team title match. Then the SmackDown match is the Cruiserweights, Undertaker, Big Show and A-Train, the Triple Threat WWE Tag Team title match, Hogan and McMahon, and Lesnar and Angle. You got 5 and 5 in that.
Yeah, you know what? That's probably what they would have done, because it seems like that's pretty balanced for the most part. WrestleMania 20, they would have a hard time with this one, the editing side of things, I guess. But we have Chris Benoit and Triple H and Shawn Michaels main eventing as it is right now, and it ends with Chris Benoit celebrating with Eddie Guerrero, who had won the other championship match. Mm-hmm. You do still have Goldberg and Brock, but they're leaving. So I'm thinking you go Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle night 1, triple threat night 2.
Oh, that's how you'd have to do it like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm completely in agreement. The only other option I think is Undertaker Kane, just because it's Undertaker returning.
And I think you split that with Goldberg and Brock as like 2 big kind of main event sort of deals. Evolution and Rock and Sock. I don't know what we balance that out really.
Nothing really does.
I guess the 4-way for the tag titles, maybe.
Which one?
Oh yeah,
there's 2 4-ways. It'd be John Cena Big Show.
Oh yeah, you know, with John Cena Big Show probably, because that's the United States title, and they always value that more so. So yeah, then you split the fatal 4-ways for the tag titles 1 on 1 night. You go the Playboy evening gown match. What balances that out? The hair versus
Tony,
title match.
We're not here booking the entire shows anymore.
No, but I'm playing around.
Which one had a Playboy? What are you talking about?
Playboy evening gown match, WrestleMania 20.
I don't remember that.
What, Tori and Sable against Jackie and Keebler?
What balances that out?
Hair versus title.
Anything. Yeah. It's a fucking Playboy evening gown match.
Yeah, you got one women's match one night, one women's match the other night. That makes sense.
Well, then it's the one that's title, yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember, this is a time frame where I'm forgetting a lot of this card stuff because I haven't seen all these all the way through. We are slowly but surely heading towards the point where we're catching up now because we're in the 20s. Past the WrestleMania 20, we're getting to WrestleMania 21 right now. Batista and Triple H had the main event of that. And, of course, the other main event, John Cena and JBL.
Yep.
That one's not difficult at all. Nobody's going to be arguing for Akebono. Sorry.
Yeah, there's really no other option on that one.
WrestleMania 22 is the John Cena and Triple H match in the main event. And then, I'm guessing you go Ray and Randy and Kurt Angle.
Yeah, and you give them more time than they actually did. They give them like 9 minutes. You give those three sons of bitches 9 minutes.
Yeah. You could make an argument that the no holds barred match between Shawn and
absolutely not. We need to stop doing this thing where we try to put Vince in the main event. If you're not even going to headline it with Hogan, you're headlining him with Ray.
Well, I mean, realistically, it should be the World Heavyweight Title match and the WWE Title match. But I would also make an argument that Nikki and Trish could do it as well.
I'd be down for that.
Because it's probably at the moment the women's feud that justifies it the most at this point. But yeah,
what's not headlining, and that's Undertaker versus Mark Henry in a casket match,
or the Playboy pillow fight between Tori Wilson and Candice Michelle.
Nor do I care about what balances that out.
it'd be great on night. It'd be great on night one if it was like Mickey and Trish. And they think, this is super progressive for the women, and they did the Playboy pillow fight night 2, and then it's just like, we're back again.
Yeah, so more than likely it's the World Heavyweight Championship match, but I could see them potentially doing that no holds barred match. It would be at least in the discussion. And then the Mickie James and Trish match, if that's not in the discussion, that's another headlining type of match at the very least. So, play around with something. I could see them though doing something like Ray opens up the first night instead.
Yeah, that does kind of feel like the way they treated him for his entire title reign. So it doesn't surprise me.
You started off hot with babyface winning a championship first time ever, underdog kind of thing.
Start off hot. Like when you really, really think about Ray's whole run there, it sucks to say, but it's like, hey, you're gonna be like the sympathy run for Eddie dying.
I don't mean necessarily Ray starting off hot. I think WrestleMania starting off hot with.
I was gonna say Ray. Like even then, they didn't start off that hot.
Yeah, you kick it off with WrestleMania being, oh my God, Rey Mysterio won the championship. This is crazy. We've got a whole rest of this night and tomorrow kind of thing. So I think that's kind of how they do that. And then I kind of think I lean more towards that Shawn and McMahon match.
I would pop if the closing shot of WrestleMania is a bloody McMahon giving the finger on the stretcher,
on night 1, and then night 2 you go with the title. I think so.
But I'm putting this out there though. 23, we're not doing Vince and Trump in the main event.
You kind of are doing.
Well, see, this one I don't think that would be the case. I think it would still be Undertaker and Batista.
I completely disagree. It would be Bobby Lashley versus Umaga because that entire WrestleMania card was built around Trump and versus McMahon.
So, in talking about the real show quickly, I do think it's weird that arguably the lesser of all three of those main events is the one that ends the overall show, because while we know who John Cena is now, that did not feel like, this is headlining the show. It felt like Vince and Trump and Undertaker and Batista. But I'm saying, in hindsight, I would rather just do the 2 world title matches.
I think that this would be one of those ones where, as much as theoretically, if you're going to try to balance out a card, you're going to want to have some downtime. And we saw it recently with like Revolution. They had the Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa match that followed a match that it really couldn't follow. And then by the time people started to get their energy back, it was into the next match that it was like, if they would have followed that one, they wouldn't have been able to follow it up, kind of. So sometimes it plays out that way, but other times they just literally do semi-main event before main event. I think the way that the John Cena and Shawn Michaels match goes, I think that might potentially go on last. But since it was a little weaker, that they would they would precede that with the Bobby Lashley and Umaga match as like the secondary main event of night 2. Do Lashley and Umaga and then do Cena and Michaels. And night 1 would end with Undertaker Batista. And I guess I don't know what the secondary main event on night 1 would be, or the opener, whichever one that would be. Money in the Bank, maybe? I guess you open up with Money in the Bank. That makes sense. Yeah. Start off first night, Money in the Bank. End the first night, Undertaker Batista. Second night, you open with whatever, I don't know, Benoit and MVP or something, I guess. And then you go Lashley Umaga right before Cena and Michaels. I think that's how they kind of balance it out. At least in my mind.
Yeah, I'm still in complete disagreement. Like, if you look at the poster for WrestleMania 23, the 2 world title matches are sandwiched right underneath this giant poster of Trump and McMahon. That was the main event.
It is Trump and McMahon and Lashley, who's a big deal at the time.
And Austin.
And, you know, much as I hate to say it, I think I'd make some major changes here, because I would argue that Batista and Taker should headline.
I think you're just saying that in retrospect because it was the better match out of the 2 of them.
But I'm also saying that because 1, it's Undertaker at WrestleMania, and 2, he wins
it's
the
John
Rumble.
Cena at John Cena's peak.
But Taker wins the Rumble.
Yeah, but they don't care about that. They didn't care when Rey Mysterio won the Rumble.
I grant you that. You're absolutely right.
At this point in time, they're past the point of caring if the Royal Rumble win a main events or not.
But I'll take a main if you do that night 1, then, main event's night 1.
Yeah, but they would do Lashley and Umaga instead. Like I think they'd even do that one night 2, and they'd have John Cena Michaels main event night 1. You'd have the Undertaker and Batista be the semi-main behind the Battle of the Billionaires.
Well, again, leave a comment. Tell us how you are leaning one way or another on this one. If you guys feel strongly one way or another.
Mostly because Callum approaches everything with logic, and I'm willing to agree with him on this.
WrestleMania 24, we've got Undertaker and Edge in the main event. It's a fun WrestleMania. I want to go back and revisit this again. Unfortunately, the WWE Championship match for this WrestleMania, despite the fact that it's Randy Orton, John Cena, and Triple H, is just sort of blah. And you've got 2 other matches that just really, it trumps it. Let's be honest. You got Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair. Ric Flair's final match, at least in WWE. And you've got Big Show and Floyd Mayweather. This is a balancing act a little bit. Of course, you more than likely do one. The WWE Championship is on night 1, but I don't think it main events night 1. And I think, of course, Undertaker and Edge main events night 2. But I mean, the bigger match is the Big Show one, but with Ric Flair's retirement. How do you go? What do you think?
I think you go Shawn and Rick. Just because it's going to be Rick's retirement match. And so you can kind of end it on that big emotional moment of Rick just like waving off the top of the ramp and stuff like that. Whereas the Floyd Mayweather Big Show match, again, it's a bit in hindsight, but it's a little bit, it's still a fun match, but it's a bit of a freak show. I think, at least with Michaels and Flair, you're going to have a good match and a lot of emotion around it. And I think people would be very satisfied with that being the main event of the show.
What do you think, Rob?
Rumor is they offered it to him, and Flair said no because he's Flair, and he wants the title to go on last. But should absolutely be.
And this is if we were balancing it out, we're not going to do the whole thing, but I think that, for instance, you wouldn't get an 11-second match with Kane and Chavo for the ECW Championship. I think you'd get the Battle Royal on night 1, and then you get the ECW title match on night 2.
I still think it'd be 11 seconds.
Yeah, it would still be 11 seconds.
It still could be, but at least it wouldn't be immediately following that kind of deal or something. I could see that being how they go. Maybe you don't necessarily open up with the Belfast Brawl. Maybe you open that up on night 2 or something. I don't know, but that's one that I want to revisit again. I haven't seen that in a while. WrestleMania 25 has Triple H and Randy Orton in the main event. One of the main events that a lot of people are not the biggest fan of, and I don't necessarily blame them. And then on top of that, you've got John Cena, Edge, and Big Show, which is just on top of that too. Yeah, they're 3 big names, they're 3 Hall of Fame names, et cetera, but that didn't feel right.
You're trying to just push for The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels to be the main event of night 1.
Oh, of course. Yeah. 100%.
I mean, it absolutely should be. You couldn't follow it.
No one. Then they demonstrably proved that they couldn't follow it. But I think they'd still put the world title match as the main event of night 1 and WWE title on night 2.
I would hope that they would have the foresight to know Taker and Michaels is going to be better, and that they would just do...
Well, I don't think they have any intention of doing that as the main event for WrestleMania 26 at this point.
No, I don't think they did either. But I would assume that they would just go, fuck it, that's the better match, and the streak means more than this triple threat.
But it's John Cena winning a world title at WrestleMania.
Blah.
I know. Well, I'm sure that's what most people reacted is, but that's what they think is a big deal.
But John Cena wins the world title at that WrestleMania and the one following, and they don't headline with either.
Maybe that would be one of those let's kick it off kind of things.
Maybe.
Which if they kick off night 1 with John Cena winning, and then the other title match is the end of night 2.
And I'd be all right with that one being a headliner and the Triple H match not. Yeah,
well, I wish the Triple H match was 15 minutes shorter than it was, but that's...
Or maybe that would be one of those weird things where they would split that up and do Edge against Big Show on night 1 and Cena against Edge on night 2.
Edge versus Big Show.
Yeah, but they were feuding with the whole Vicky thing.
No.
Yeah, but I don't want to think that.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it might be one of those options they would have done. But my vote would go Undertaker and Shawn Michaels on night 1. Triple H and Randy Orton on night 2.
It's probably the most likely one out of the 2.
I think we pretty much know what's happening when it comes to the next year, because we've got Undertaker and Shawn Michaels is the main event with this streak and the career on the line, but we've got the WWE Championship match. It's John Cena and Batista. So there you go. It's those 2. Sorry, Jericho and Edge.
Well, the other choice is Hart and McMahon.
Woof. Fuck no.
I know. Well, yeah, but they don't know it's going to be a bad match going into it. They think it's really good storytelling.
Yeah, but I don't think that even comes
I think
close.
they know it's going to be a bad match going into it. I just think that they needed to tell that story.
That match is over 11 minutes long.
That match is too long.
That match is 10 minutes and 30 seconds longer than it should have been. That was garbage. No holds barred lumberjack match. It's got a special guest referee.
They didn't need the whole thing where the whole family's around they didn't need that.
They didn't need to do this at all. It's just none of this is really good. But I think you go Cena Batista and you go Taker and Michaels.
That's what I'd do.
And then of course the night that you've got Taker and Michaels, that's when you've got Jericho and Edge. You got to balance out the championships. Let's see. We got WrestleMania 27.
Talk about something that I never want to revisit again.
You got The Miz against John Cena.
I mean, this is obvious. Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler headline night 1. Miz and John Cena have... No, okay. It's Taker.
This is the
Taker
fucking
Triple H.
definition of a one-match card. Undertaker Triple H. That's the only match worth. To be fair, Randy Orton CM Punk is good.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Which
and
is
Cody Rhodes and Rey Mysterio's that's fun. But that Edge and Alberto Del Rio, woof, fuck no.
Well, it's just they're decent matches, but it's well,
I think you're saying
they both had rematches in at Backlash that were better. or Extreme Rules actually at that point in time, which were better. So it's like, okay, you can watch that on any B show. Just the only big match was Undertaker and Triple H, and Miz and Cena was, yeah, I think it's definitely high in contention for worst main event ever.
I'm curious. I'm going to try to look up because I'm pretty sure that I have the breakdown on Smark Moment here about what my thoughts were. Let's see. Okay, we got. Oh my God! Did the announcer just say "la la 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 la" pie eating with an incredibly dorky inflection? So my first thoughts on the opening was, for an opening match, this was very good. If it would have been the main event, I would have been a letdown. Never should have opened the pay-per-view to begin with, but we'll talk more about that later. Focus on the positives. The match itself, for its position on the card, was very entertaining, and I guess Edge would win, and I guessed that Edge would win, and nobody believed me. Ha.
To be fair, he retired like,
and then he just retires and everything. So
they kind of got the last laugh.
Yeah. So I mean, at the time, I at least was like, fine, fucking, whatever. That sucks that the title's going on first, but it's Del Rio, so I don't really care. But I still don't think that even comes close to that. It's Undertaker and Triple H, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that should just fucking headline the show. That was the best thing that the show did.
Well, then it carries over into the next year, because you've got Hell in a Cell, Undertaker and Triple H, Shawn Michaels.
They did know that because they went right out of that, and the very next night he cut a promo like, "Yeah, I'll be waiting, Taker." So they knew what they were doing.
Now, of course, we do end with Rock and Cena, and we're going to come back to that again, of course, later on too. But the World Heavyweight Championship match opens up this night as well. It's 18 seconds, Sheamus and Daniel Bryan. And they had a plan with that in mind, but that's not going to be suddenly, we make a whole big change, whatever. And then that ends up being that.
I didn't have that plan at all, no.
They didn't have a plan. What the fuck are you talking about?
The plan was
are you one of those truthers that think that Daniel Bryan's entire push was planned?
No.
Okay.
No. Do you really think that I would be one of those people?
No, of course not. Just like...
No, their plan was, wouldn't it be funny if we humiliate Daniel Bryan in the opening of WrestleMania?
Yeah.
No, that was their plan. So that's not changing at all. Sheamus is beating Daniel Bryan in 18 seconds, exactly the same.
That has to be an opening match, though.
Right. Yeah, it's going to start off because you start off WrestleMania with the World Heavyweight Championship, and oh my God, the championship changed hands and whatever. Then let's move on to whatever the fuck, and then they split things up and whatever. But yeah, for anybody who would say, oh, then maybe that would get more time, they still would fucking do something stupid like that. So it's night one. Despite the fact that this would be a weird scenario, I think that they'd go Undertaker Triple H on night one and Rock and Cena on night two, and it would be neither of the championships.
Yep,
I think that's the way they absolutely should have done it.
Considering all the 4 people that were fighting for the World Championships, I absolutely have zero confidence that they would have any of those people main event the show.
I thought it was weird when I was watching that they had Triple H and Taker at the top of the first hour. Like, that was a main event level match.
Isn't this so weird looking at this? Like, this is WrestleMania from 10 years ago. And there's only 9 matches with one on the pre-show. One's 18 seconds. There's 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. There's nothing going on for this compared to what they just go, and we're going to book a whole weekend kind of deal. But yeah, that's how they do it. And then we get into the one that I was actually present for that was disappointing as all hell. By the way, I always bring this up when it comes to the talk about WrestleMania 29. I always bring up the idea that I was disappointed in MetLife's hot dogs and cheese fries. Caroline and I went to go see Elton John at Barclays a week or so ago. I forget exactly when, however many days. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to eat anything ahead of time because I'll eat something there. I'll get one of my fucking foil hot dogs. I'll get a thing of cheese fries. Motherfuckers didn't have cheese fries. And the hot dogs came in a little plastic container. I was like, am I never going to get this again? So if you know an arena out there that's got that going on, let me know. I need to have another arena, proper foil hot dog wrapped up and some fucking good cheese fries.
What's wrong with you?
Plenty. But I was disappointed as all hell with WrestleMania 29 in a lot of different ways. Not only something like that, but we could get into a lot of more complicated things, death in the family and so on and so forth. But John Cena and The Rock for the WWE Championship is the main event, and that it's for the WWE Championship, and it makes perfect sense that that's not budging whatsoever. Secondary one, I'm not going Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger. That's for damn sure. That didn't even get any fucking pyro.
They didn't go anywhere near it.
We didn't know the match was happening. They literally started having the entrances when they weren't paying any attention to anything, and they didn't even have it up on the screen. So, a couple of people are like, oh shit, I guess.
Oh, you're talking about being in the venue. Yeah, we didn't know what was happening.
No, it had no fucking clue. It was just like, oh, the match is going to start. Okay. And this is dumb and I hate it.
I mean, there's a reason for that. Jack Swagger got arrested right before.
And on TV, they didn't even have entrances.
Yeah.
On the actual pay-per-view.
Awful. But do you go Undertaker Punk or do you go Triple H and Lesnar?
I mean, if you're, with the value of hindsight, you go Undertaker Punk. Because one of Punk's biggest gripes was the fact that he never got to main event WrestleMania.
Right. Which, by the way, if WrestleMania is 2 nights, probably solves a lot of that gripe.
Yeah. So you kind of go, it's one of the ones where you could do one of the weird fantasy book things where you have Punk versus Rock on night 1 and Cena versus Rock on night 2. And then that kind of balances out both. But then, if you're just going straight by the card, it should, based on the quality of match, it should be Undertaker and Punk. Based on what we know for the future, it'll be Punk and Undertaker. So my choice would probably be Triple H and Brock Lesnar.
I think that they'd go Triple H and Lesnar as well.
I think, well, if you remember, the storyline was, and it'll be his last match.
Right. So even though the streak was on the line, and even though it's CM Punk who just had the championship for like a year, and he is going in with the Undertaker, it's WrestleMania, that kind of thing, I think that they would value the Brock Lesnar match more. And I think that they would kind of just look at that as like, hey, sometimes it still doesn't work out. I personally, of course, would go Undertaker Punk. But then again, my favorite part of this entire night was Undertaker's entrance. So maybe not the best person for that. Do you think that we would still get a Money in the Bank cash in on Raw, or do you think that we would get it on night 2 or something?
Like, a lot of those things would change as well.
Yeah. Let's follow that up with WrestleMania 30. That was not at all what they had planned, because they 100% wanted to do Batista versus Randy Orton, and then Daniel Bryan comes along and he's popular as fuck, and they go, I guess we got to change some of these plans. We were supposed to get CM Punk versus Triple H, and it was going to be Daniel Bryan, most likely it seems, against either Sheamus or just something kind of, we'll figure something else out for him. We've got Brock Lesnar and Undertaker, which, of course, that's fucking weird, isn't it? But you've got Daniel Bryan and Triple H. If we're going with the same thing, do you go Bryan and Triple H main eventing, and then Bryan just does the next night? Or do you end WrestleMania's night 1 with Brock Lesnar beating the streak?
You absolutely end night 1 with Brock Lesnar beating the streak.
Absolutely.
God damn, I would be pissed.
Yeah. But that's the point. It's like you got a whole nother.
And then you give people time to breathe.
Yeah.
And not shit on whatever's left on the show.
Yeah.
Because
they did that, and then they put that whole Vicky Guerrero Invitational where no one fucking. I think people wouldn't have cared anyway, but it's just the case of they really just didn't want to see.
Yeah, but those poor women. Like, they were fighting up a hill anyway, right? But you gotta follow Undertaker losing, where people I know were just like genuinely depressed after that. If it wasn't ending with Bryan, and I mean, it could have ended with anybody, even if Punk was still there. If it wasn't ending with Bryan, that would have been a disappointing night.
I mean, Punk being there completely changes the card as well, because you're getting most likely Punk against Triple H, and Daniel Bryan's fighting somebody else. Maybe you stretch it around a little bit and you go, Punk ends up fighting Kane, because they were kind of fucking around with that. But this is a different show, I think. Brock Lesnar probably still beats Undertaker, but maybe that would be even the type of thing that if you mess around with this card, Vince just wakes up one day and he's just like, yeah, you know what? I don't think that the streak needs to end because I want to end happy and wait. God knows what timeline we get out of this, but that's interesting to think about. I do think more than likely they probably would go with the streak because wouldn't it be interesting? And that's the type of pitch that they do sometimes. It's, hey, it might not be the best idea. It might be a disaster even, but wouldn't it be interesting if? And this is what if. So Seth Rollins against Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns is technically the main event of WrestleMania 31, even though it was not what the original plan was because Money in the Bank gets cashed in and, we kind of just insert a third person there. But Brock against Roman, main event of night 2, assuming Seth Rollins does the same thing. You just kind of keep that going.
Triple H and Sting.
Triple H and Sting is the front runner, I would think. Undertaker and Bray Wyatt doesn't beat that out in my book. John Cena and Rusev, of course, is the United States title, so that's not as prominent.
They could have considered that just because it's, but like Undertaker, if you do Triple H and Sting, you get the build towards what they wanted to do with Undertaker, quote unquote. And, like they apparently had bigger plans for Sting and everything just shit the bed, but also I think they couldn't help themselves. They would think that that's the biggest thing just because there's never been anything bigger than the Attitude Era. And quite frankly, Sting deserves a WrestleMania main event. There's plenty of worse people who have them.
Yeah, I think you put Taker and Wyatt on night 2, you main event night 1, Triple H and Sting, and you've got Brock and Roman, of course, at the main event of night 2. I don't know what opens up. I mean, you open up with the ladder match the way that it is now.
Open up with the ladder match on one of the nights, and I think
night 2.
You open up with not John.
Maybe Randy and Seth.
Randy and Seth, yeah.
Yeah. Agree, disagree, Callum?
I think Cena and Rusev would be the main event of night 1.
I mean, Vince likes America. Like that
What Cena's winning? Cena wins the match. They're not going to have, well, as I said, they were not going to have, they would have. But having Triple H win the match against Sting just completely takes away out of the room.
You don't think that they would,
Oh, yeah, they absolutely would, but it just takes aware out of the room, so I'd rather not think about it, that being the case.
I mean, both great options, though. Even honestly, Taker, because, hey, he's back and he looks as good as ever,
We're on the final 4 of these. Roman Reigns and Triple H.
Well, we can't we're not going to do 36 and 37, are we? Because they have a night 1 and night 2.
Right, yeah. We got 32, 33, 34, and 35. World Heavyweight Championship is Triple H and Roman Reigns. We're sticking with that. WrestleMania 32 is a fucking mess, yeah.
Even worse.
So bad.
Triple H has some of the worst main events in WrestleMania history.
Now, the match that goes before that is technically The Rock against future legend Eric Rowan. It's a 6-second match, but of course that's not the thing.
But realistically, ending WrestleMania with John Cena and The Rock isn't out of the realm of possibility. They're just celebrating.
But we've got, this is a weird WrestleMania. We've got, matches that really don't matter, like the League of Nations and stuff.
Because they're not going to do Rock and Ambrose.
But they could do Charlotte against Becky and Sasha.
They weren't ready yet.
I think that there's a chance that they could have pulled the trigger then.
It's the first women's championship. Well, because this is the first move away from the Divas title. Yeah. So it's a big, big deal.
And it's 3 of the 4 horsewomen. Maybe they might have even called up Bayley and just done the 4 horsewomen match.
Yeah, I just don't think that they're ready. This is probably where they had to be, kicking and screaming away from the term divas. Like, okay, fine, I guess we'll give you a regular belt, and okay, fine, I guess we'll let you wrestle.
Isn't it kind of weird to look at this card and go, oh, it's Chris Jericho versus AJ Styles right after Zack Ryder wins the Intercontinental Championship from Kevin Owens and Sin Cara and Stardust.
Oh,
and then you go into the League of Nations, and like this is a weird transitional period because I just, in my brain, League of Nations isn't at the same time as AJ Styles, nor is it Intercontinental Champion Zack Ryder. Like it's just those seem like 3 different eras, sort of.
My theory is that 32 is what kicks off the we don't care anymore. It's just a show.
Yeah.
It's just a big spectacle.
And I think that some of that is just, yeah, we've done 31 of these and we don't fucking care. I think some of it is we've lost a little bit of the magic because we don't have some of the same people anymore. And of course, 32 was plagued with injuries. So,
oh yeah, I mean, there's a version of this that's John Cena, Roman Reigns, Triple H and The Rock, and Undertaker and Sting. There's a version of this somewhere in the multiverse.
It's whatever timeline Brock didn't win the previous year. But I don't think you'd go Brock and Ambrose, for instance. I think that it's either the Hell in a Cell match, Undertaker and Shane McMahon, or it's the potential of the women's match. I don't know about which one I'd pick. I think I'd kind of lean towards the women.
Women.
The women.
I wouldn't. Like, it's too much of a story for Shane and Undertaker. They told the most important story going into that show. They didn't follow up on it. See my point about WrestleMania just becoming a show. But that was the biggest story. Oh my God, if Shane wins, he gets control of Raw. Taker's already lost at Mania. Nobody really was like, oh, well, he's got to preserve the streak. The streak was dead. So anything could have happened. I think that's the one you go with.
In an ideal world, I'd go with the women's title match. I think it's more important and it would be more important as a marker going forward than the Undertaker and Shane match, which was a 30-minute long fart.
Hey, 30 minutes and 5 seconds. That's extra 5 seconds.
I'm not arguing that point at all. I was just looking at it from a more realistic approach. But I agree with you. In an ideal world, you do go with the women. Yeah,
I think that they lean more towards the women in this scenario, partially because it's crowning the women's championship, and it could be like, look, you're talking about how we don't give the women a chance. We're giving them the main event of WrestleMania, and we're calling it the women's championship. But it's also because Charlotte Flair wins. So it's like, they've known from the very start that they want Charlotte Flair to be the absolute pinnacle of the women's division history. And if they have her win the main event of the first, women's main event of WrestleMania, I think that's when they pull the trigger. Because let's be honest, I mean, the main event of the WrestleMania 35 with the women like that wasn't the plan anyway either. It was going to be Charlotte Flair winning that.
Charlotte defeats Ronda Rousey.
Right. So if it ultimately was, we're going to have Charlotte Flair win the main event, I think that they might have done it then. And if that's the case, that opens up the door for the potential of that happening even more so on 33, 34, and of course 35, sticking with that. 33 has Roman Reigns and Undertaker, though. No holds barred match. In what should have been Undertaker losing the streak for the first time, I think. And then it's Brock Lesnar and Goldberg because they had to fucking do that.
Well, I think in hindsight, that Undertaker match doesn't go anywhere near the main event. Honestly, if we're talking about something they might throw in the main event, it's that disgusting mixed tag match. And I don't mean to say like I didn't like it. I just mean hindsight, they shouldn't have done it. But I think that's something they would have ended Mania with.
I don't think that they would have done that. I think that secondary to that, I wouldn't even put the Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt match, funny enough. I would put, if you're not going to go the Lesnar and Goldberg and Roman Reigns and Undertaker route, I think the other thing is Seth Rollins and Triple H. But to me, it's Lesnar, Goldberg, Reigns, Taker.
Yeah, I'd say that as well. I think if anything has been determined beyond obviously that the Undertaker is not around anymore, it's like those three guys are the three kind of killers for the men's division for the last 5 years or so. So yeah, don't see any other direction than that.
What would you have close the overall show?
Reigns Taker because of the Reigns aspect. It's not even the Taker aspect. It's all about Reigns. So
yeah.
All right. Yeah. You guys have convinced me. That match is so sad to me.
A lot of this stuff is sad. We're firmly in the it's all sad territory outside of this little hiccup of like the Kofi Mania type stuff coming up, but we still have WrestleMania 34 to get through, which of course ends with, you thought we'd do the Roman and Brock thing and end it. Well, it took another year for us to wait a little longer.
4, but that's okay.
Fucking hell, I hate it. But it is Brock and Roman, and that's the one that's the main event the way that it is. So we're looking for a secondary main event here. And
now, in hindsight, this is the first year you do have a women's Royal Rumble winner.
So you have the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship. You've got the WWE Championship, AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. Not a chance does Styles and Nakamura main event night 1. That's an opener of night 2, or it's, one of those kind of deals. There's no way.
All right, so if we're living in the fantasy world where we just booked the women's match to headline 32, I think you can get away with saying, and Ronda Rousey headlines night 1 of WrestleMania, and that mixed tag match is the main event. That's a good match. Night 1
main event, yep. In my mind, it'd be Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey against Triple H and Stephanie.
That's what I'd go with.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that's the...
As good as Charlotte and Asuka is, that match is more pomp and circumstance because it's Ronda, and it's overall just more star power.
I'm kind of in retrospect glad that I'm glad we're a lot of these shows, but I'm glad that this one in particular was not a 2-night thing, because that means that for the whole first night we'd have to spend pretty much every minute a camera cutting to John Cena sitting in the crowd.
That'd be amazing.
And then he turns up at night 2, and then there's the first match, and then it's like, oh, he's here at this time, so you can actually do it. But it'd be like,
that's how they end the night, with a gong and I'll see you tomorrow. That's exactly how they end the first night.
Yeah, I mean I think that they would go something along the lines of that Angle Rousey match, main eventing night 1, and Styles and Nakamura. If it's not opening night 1, I think it's right before the mixed tag match, just to be like, look, it's the semi-main event. It's, they want to fuck around with some of that as much as they can. And then we got our final one here, WrestleMania 35. This one is when they finally realized, hey, this is going on pretty fucking long. Maybe we should split this up a little bit, because it literally, the main event is on the next day.
It starts at midnight, yeah.
So technically speaking, it is day 2, that kind of thing. But Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey, and Charlotte Flair is the main event. It's not what they had planned. They wanted to do Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, not in the mix at all, just Flair and Rousey. But things worked out a little differently. So if we're sticking with the card exactly the way that it is right now, just kind of splitting things up a little bit, that's the main event of night 2. And they potentially had already done the women's main event, so it's not necessarily as big of a deal, but it's Ronda Rousey. It's still a big deal, that kind of thing. The other match
has to be Kofi.
I'm thinking Kofi Mania makes the most sense.
Hindsight 2020 on this one has to be Kofi Kingston.
There's still an argument, though, that they would have potentially...
It would be Brock versus Seth.
They could have done Brock and Seth, and they also could have done Triple H and Batista.
I wouldn't think they'd do Batista and Triple H.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to see that.
No, it wouldn't get my vote. My vote would be Kofi Mania. But I think that they would at least be mulling over the idea, because it was Triple H having the whole, you're going to have to be retired if this is the case, and this is Batista's last one.
Yep. I'm kind of tired with all the matches being stuff over. Can you just just retire already?
That seems like he has. But I think that they would at least mull over the idea, but I think that they would ultimately go with Kofi Mania.
Well, no gimmick that Brock was just oh, fuck it, I'll go on first. See ya.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. I could see Brock going on first of night 2. And then it's all right, night 1 starts off with maybe Roman and Drew or so. Maybe it's AJ and Orton. I don't know. Play around a little bit. Night 1 ends with the Kofi Mania scenario, and then they kind of play around with that. Maybe it ends up being, instead of that, it's no, I mean they wouldn't have started off. They're the pre-shows and stuff. That's a different story if you factor that in. But yeah, I think that I think we'd go Kofi Mania. We would, yeah. If we have any control.
Yeah. I'd say we'd go Mania. I'm 100% convinced they'd go Rollins Brock.
I mean, Rollins was as hot as he'd ever be.
Rollins was run the Royal Rumble. Lesnar's a bigger deal. The only reason I think that they just were so keen on going night on the opening match is because they were dead set on having the women main event, on having the triple threat main event, the show.
I mean, and so
now that's out of the way, or that's going to main event another show. There's absolutely nothing that prevents them from doing Rollins and Brock as the main event of the other night.
And if you follow the pattern, much like Roman the year prior, Rollins does end up beating Lesnar in the headlining match at SummerSlam. So Callum does have a point.
And they buried the Kingston and Bryan match in the middle, which is exactly how they positioned his title reign as well.
So WrestleMania 36, we already know what it is. Yeah. We're all caught up. It wouldn't have been how I would have ended it, you know. But
it does bring me to an interesting thought of this is the first year, the one that we're currently in, where WrestleMania is 2 nights and there's no big like, okay, we're in the pandemic and it's weird because we're dealing with COVID. Okay, the special thing here is the fans are back. This is the first one that's 2 nights that's just like a normal show. And I'm interested to see whether or not it holds up or if it just completely sucks.
See, what sucks about that is I think one way or the other, positive or negative, you can't even judge it. Because this WrestleMania card is not feeling right to me.
But I think that's why you can judge it. Because maybe you don't need to keep making these concessions of doing like, let's have a fucking 2-night WrestleMania. Like, we went through the New Generation stuff. There's no need to ever split those shows into 2. And there's arguably no need to stretch these.
But I don't think
need to be that long.
I don't think that WrestleMania has this card because it's a 2-night card. I think they would have this exact same thing if it was 1 night. They would just cut a couple of those matches out. Like, I don't think, for instance, I mean, we're going to get the next week or so, we're going to finally see where they go with some of these other things. It's looking to me like they're literally going to waste Randy Orton and Matt Riddle as let's just have them in a tag title match, and it's probably going to be against the Street Profits and Alpha Academy, and just be like fucking whatever. The Usos are most likely going to defend in like a fatal 4-way, and they just wouldn't be on the card, or it would be one of those like 7-hour WrestleManias. But I think they would still literally do Logan Paul's in a match, and Johnny Knoxville's in a match, and so I think that if you're judging the card of WrestleMania this year and you're saying, well, if it wasn't 2 nights that it would be better, I don't think that's the case. I think it would just be, holy fuck, that 1 night is just as bad, and my God, I can't wait to get it over with. So it feels weird because it's like, I don't want that blowing back on the idea of a 2-night WrestleMania and making people think that, yeah, you know, here's an analogy. You'll appreciate this, Rob. Spider-Man 3 is not bad because there's Venom in the movie. Spider-Man 3 is bad because Venom wasn't supposed to be in the movie. And the idea that they do this, like, there's too many villains and that's why the movies suck. There's plenty of movies that have 4 villains and it's perfectly fine. But it's selective thought process. If you know how to balance it out and you're going into something well enough like that, the little details like that don't really matter. So I don't want to see this year's WrestleMania fail from having a shitty card of rematches and stuff, and then have that people go, okay, well then that means that a 2-night WrestleMania doesn't work. You can have a good 2-night WrestleMania, and it can be just as good, if not better.
I just don't think that it's necessary. But I also don't think that in saying that the show needs to be 7 hours anyway. I think, again, condition your audience that, okay, look, WrestleMania is going to be quicker, but WrestleMania is going to be more action-packed. Listen, there's ways to brand these things. I'm not going to sit here and do
stupendous.
But, like, you don't need to do it like that. And if anything, this whole discussion has taught me we're more in the era of WrestleMania 1, where you really don't need this, than we are as opposed to, like, 5-6 years ago, where, yeah, maybe 2 nights would have been a little nice.
Well, one way or another, that is what we're assuming would have happened if you could split these up in 2 nights. Keep in mind, of course, as we've said throughout this whole thing, plenty of these cards would be completely different if they had 2 nights because they would have booked with that philosophy in mind. But we've got the benefit of hindsight. Wrestling is 2020. We're kind of looping this all back around like that. So if you agree, let us know what stood out to you as like the things that you were like, yep, that's exactly what. That's great. If you disagree, what were you screaming at your screen going, you guys are fucking idiots. It would clearly be such and such instead of that or something. Chat it up in the comment section below and let us know some other what if ideas that you have in mind for us to do in the future. The ones that we have on the back burner are still on the back burner. Like what if Stone Cold Steve Austin never got his neck injured by Owen Hart? Or what if the Montreal screw job never happened? Or, I mean, we can go into all sorts of different things here. And, maybe we do that coming up over the next couple of months if something's really standing out to us or so. But, I don't know. We'll see. So tell us what you thought. And while you're following us and you're hitting up the comment section and doing all that kind of good stuff, double check that you are subscribed and that you are also following us on Facebook and Twitter at SmarkOutMoment. Check out fanboysanonymous.com for everything that's happening over there. And maybe there's some what if topics that can be over on Fanboys and stuff as well. What if Superman was actually Batman instead? Or I don't know, whatever the hell. We can play around with that too. And then if you're following all those accounts over on fanboysanonymous.com, then you should follow the individual accounts that we have here. I am at Tony Mango. Rob's that dude Felice all over the place.
I am, and you can follow me there on every social media platform, including Twitch. WWE 2K22 is out. I'm going to try to be streaming that more on Twitch as I try to learn the new controls and all that stuff. So follow me over there and check out all that stuff. But you should also support Callum Wiggins at Wigmeister14, right, Callum?
Yep, follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. Check out everything that's going out on the smarkcommand.com website. But pay special attention to the power rankings, my week-to-week contribution. And also follow the Fantasy League as well, because we're in the home stretch. WrestleMania is the end goal, and things are looking a little tight at the top. So make sure you're following along with that as well.
WWEFantasyLeague.com is where you'll find that stuff, everyone. And, of course, everything else that's happening on SmarkOutMoment.com you'll find on SmarkOutMoment, including the hot tags coming up in the next few days. We got that dark cast that we're going to be doing, where we're going to talk about our cards for our fantasy booking of the NXT mock draft thing that we had done last month. No, but the month before that, because last month we ended up doing a different kind of dark cast. So if you're interested in that, take advantage of the Patreon and the members only YouTube, and we will see you with those. And we'll continue on with the WrestleMania stuff throughout these next few weeks until we get into WrestleMania itself, for WrestleMania 38. So more topics coming. Hall of Fame talk. We got Vader. We got Taker. And we'll see you then, everybody. But for now,
a rumor for Sid. Go Sid.
I'm cool with Sid. Maybe we'll do some retrospective Sid content. I don't know. And I don't know. You play it by ear. So if you have any suggestions, let us know, and we'll take that into consideration. But that's going to be it for this episode. So thank you for listening, everybody. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we're being counted out.